The quokka. There's an animal in Australia that walks up to total strangers, looks them in the eye, and lets them take pictures with it. Tourists call it the world's happiest animal. The reason it's that friendly is also the reason it almost went extinct. The quokka is a small marsupial, about the size of a house cat, and it lives mostly on Rottnest Island, off the coast of Western Australia. Its mouth structure naturally curves upward, which produces the famous smile. Somewhere along the line, biology decided this thing needed a permanent grin and no off switch for trust. Bold move. Quokkas used to cover most of southwestern Australia. Then, Europeans introduced red foxes and feral cats, and the quokka had no defensive instincts because it spent millions of years on a continent without ground predators. So when foxes arrived, quokkas just stood there. Once spread across most of southwestern Australia, then crashed to a few thousand survivors on a couple of islands. Today, there are maybe 12,000 left worldwide. An animal that used to live across an entire region of a continent now exists almost entirely in 2 zip codes. Most people think the quokka selfie trend means they're domesticated. They're not. Touching them is illegal under Western Australian law. They carry salmonella, and they bite hard enough to draw blood. The smile is a face shape, not consent. The friendliest face nature ever produced just couldn't outrun a fox. Evolution gave the quokka a permanent smile. It just forgot to give it a reason to ever stop. The capybara. There's a viral genre on the internet built around one animal. Capybaras sitting next to monkeys, ducks, alligators, cats, turtles, somehow always at the center of a multi-species pile, and never flinching. It looks staged. It isn't. There's a measurable reason their nervous system runs cooler than every other rodent's. The capybara is the largest living rodent on Earth. Adults weigh up to 140 pounds, which is a polite way of saying they're the size of a Labrador and shaped like a beanbag. They're native to the wetlands of South America. They live in herds of 10 to 40. Studies comparing capybaras to territorial rodents like guinea pigs show capybaras have denser serotonin receptors in the regions of the brain that handle emotional regulation. Their resting cortisol, the stress hormone, runs lower than every comparable mammal. They're not pretending to be calm. The chemistry is calm. They have, accidentally, what humans have spent decades trying to buy in supplement form. Researchers in Brazil have documented capybaras tolerated by jaguars in shared mud baths. They live in a wetland ecosystem stuffed with predators, caimans, jaguars, anacondas, harpy eagles, and water means escape is always seconds away. Animals that develop a pause and assess stress response live longer than animals that bolt. Bolt, and a caiman tracks the splash. Stand still and walk into the water, and the predator usually loses interest. Most people think capybaras are friendly because they're happy. They're not. Their calm is a strategy, not a mood. The internet calls capybaras the chillest animal on Earth, and somehow the science actually agrees. Calm isn't a personality. It's a survival strategy that runs at the level of brain chemistry. The manatee. If you've ever been in a Florida spring and felt something the size of a small car drift up next to you, that was a manatee. They aren't checking you for threats. They genuinely don't have a category in their brain for, this thing might hurt me. That trust has a number attached to it, and the number is grim. The Florida manatee is a subspecies of the West Indian manatee. Adults weigh up to 1,200 pounds and stretch about 10 feet long. Pure herbivore, eats around 10% of its body weight in seagrass every day. No natural predators in adulthood. Florida wildlife biologists have cataloged this for decades. Roughly 96% of adult Florida manatees carry scars from boat strikes. 1 in 4 has been hit on 10 or more separate occasions. The animal that has nothing to fear from any animal is the animal whose biggest threat is propellers. 1,200 pounds of muscle, no defensive aggression, no flight response. A bottlenose dolphin can sprint at 40 miles per hour. A manatee tops out around 15, only when something has already gone very wrong. They developed in shallow tropical waters with no large predators capable of taking down an adult, so the species saved energy by not building flight reflexes, and now lives in the same waterways as outboard engines. The cost of being unafraid, in this case, is shaped exactly like a propeller. Despite the name sea cow, manatees aren't related to cows. Their closest living land relative is the elephant. The trunk-like upper lip is the giveaway. If you're enjoying these deep dives into the animals that don't get the credit they deserve, I post new ones regularly. Subscribing really helps. Thanks. The African elephant. Imagine a stranger walking up to you tomorrow and reacting to you exactly the way someone you helped 13 years ago would react. That's been documented. The friendly version of Elephants Never Forget is a children's book line. The actual research is much stranger. The African bush elephant is the largest land animal on Earth. Adults stand up to 13 feet at the shoulder and weigh up to 12,000 pounds. Their brain mass tops 11 pounds, roughly 3 times the size of a human brain. They live in matriarchal herds, led by an elder female who is, essentially, the herd's institutional memory. Researchers have run experiments where elephants were exposed to t-shirts worn by previous keepers. Even after 13 plus years and no contact, the elephants still showed clearly increased interest in the familiar scent. Wild African elephants have been observed pausing, slowing down, and changing direction when encountering people who once worked at orphan rescue camps that raised them as calves. You're not a stranger to an elephant. You're a 13-year-old open file. A working memory window of more than a decade, in a brain 3 times bigger than ours, in a body that can flip a Land Cruiser if it decides it remembers you wrong. Long memory is an ecological tool, not a metaphor. Matriarchs have to remember the location of water holes only used during droughts that hit once every 15 years. The same memory architecture that maps decades-old terrain maps decades-old faces. Whoever helped and whoever didn't gets filed in the same system. The phrase "elephants never forget" is usually said warmly. The flip side is the part nobody quotes. Most humans can't remember what they ate Tuesday. Elephants don't just remember kindness. They remember it longer than the people who showed it. The European robin. Ask anyone who gardens in the UK or Northern Europe what shows up the second they start digging. The answer is always the same. A small bird, bright orange chest, one cocked eye, watching from the rim of the flower bed. The robin isn't following the human. It's following something that hasn't existed in Britain for centuries. Erythicus rubecula is about 5.5 inches long, with the bright orange-red breast that gave the bird its name. They're highly territorial, and will fight other robins to the death over a half-acre patch. Continental European robins are actually shy of humans, and stick to dense forest. Only the British and Irish populations follow people around, because Britain is where, for centuries, robins followed wild boar. Boar root through leaf litter, kicking up worms. Robins learn to time their feeding to a boar's path. When wild boar were hunted out of Britain in the medieval period, the robins didn't lose the behavior. They just transferred it to gardeners. Somewhere along the line, biology coded a behavior into the British robin keyed to an animal that hasn't existed in the country for hundreds of years, and the bird is still running the program. A male robin during territorial disputes will sing for over 10 hours straight. The bird that lands on your spade weighs less than a slice of bread and would fight a bear over a worm. The boar disappeared, the shortcut stayed. Most people assume the robin is being friendly. It isn't. It's calculating that you're statistically likely to expose lunch. The friendliest bird in Europe isn't here for you. It's here for the food a wild boar that died centuries ago is supposed to be kicking up. The giant panda. Pandas are bears. Their lineage diverged from the brown bear branch roughly 19 million years ago. Brown bears chase elk, take down moose, and attack people. Pandas chew bamboo and let zookeepers walk past their head. That difference isn't a personality trait, it's anatomical. Adult pandas weigh between 220 and 250 pounds. Their diet is over 99% bamboo. They're active about 14 hours a day, almost all of it eating, and they only digest about 17% of what they consume. Picture eating 14 hours a day on the equivalent of celery. A study published in the journal Science measured daily energy expenditure across captive and wild pandas. The result? About 38% of what a mammal of that size should burn. Their thyroid hormone levels sit at roughly half of normal. Their kidneys, liver, brain, and gallbladder are smaller than predicted for their body mass. The panda is, in effect, idling. A typical brown bear of the same weight burns roughly 2.5 times the calories per day. A grizzly will sprint 35 miles per hour. A panda's fast is closer to a determined walk. To survive on a diet of low-protein, high-fiber, almost no-fat bamboo, pandas could either get bigger or shrink the metabolic budget. They chose the second option. It's not that pandas are docile because they're cute. It's that their bodies can't afford the calories aggression burns. Scientists studying how the panda even manages to stay alive on its diet have basically settled on by giving up on most of being a bear. A panda doesn't fight you because a panda can't afford to fight. The calories don't add up. Friendliness doesn't always come from love. Sometimes it comes from running on fumes. The emperor penguin. An emperor penguin sees a human bundled in red Antarctic gear, considers the situation, and walks over. Not flees, not freezes, walks over. There's a reason that response exists nowhere else on the planet. Aptenodytes forsteri is the largest living penguin. Adults stand nearly 4 feet tall and weigh up to 90 pounds. They're endemic to Antarctic sea ice, the only bird species that breeds during the Antarctic winter. Antarctica is the only continent that has never had a native land predator large enough to threaten an adult emperor penguin. No bears, no big cats, no wolves, nothing. So somewhere along the line, biology shrugged and stopped building the standard scan the shore for threats reflex into them. When something new arrives, a human, a camera tripod, a vehicle, the emperor's default response is investigate, not flee. Antarctic sea ice covers an area nearly twice the size of the continental United States during winter. They live their entire lives in a place where, for tens of millions of years, the ground itself never produced a single thing that wanted to eat them. The penguin's threat detection system was wired for the ocean, leopard seals, orcas, not the land. Curiosity is what fills the gap. Researchers who work with emperors are careful to say the birds aren't friendly the way a dog is friendly. They tolerate humans because humans don't fit any predator template. That's not affection, that's the absence of warning signals. The most formal-looking bird on Earth walks up to you like it's checking on a delivery. Emperor penguins aren't friendly because they like you. They're friendly because their continent never invented anything for them to be afraid of. The beluga whale. There's one more animal that earned a spot here, even though it doesn't fit one specific continent. The Arctic Ocean wraps around the top of the planet, touching Russia, Canada, Greenland, and Alaska. Living in those waters is a white whale so curious about humans that it follows boats, stares into divers' masks, and mimics human voices. A beluga in the wild will often swim directly up to a diver's mask and stay there. The species is so chatty that early sailors named them the canaries of the sea. That same curiosity is exactly what made the species the easiest large whale on Earth to slaughter. Belugas are white, with a rounded forehead called a melon that focuses sound for echolocation. Adults reach about 13 feet long. One captive beluga, named Knock, repeatedly produced low-frequency sounds matching the rhythm and pitch of human speech, well enough that researchers published the vocalizations in the journal Current Biology. Belugas have flexible necks, unique among whales. 19th century whaling fleets in the St. Lawrence and Hudson Bay reported belugas swimming directly up to the boats they were being harpooned from. Quokkas survived because their friendliness happened on islands. Belugas weren't that lucky. The same curiosity that brings them to a diver's mask brought them to a whaler's boat. In the absence of constant predator pressure, vocal complexity and social curiosity were free to develop as social bonding tools. The beluga's smile is anatomy, not emotion. The curve where the melon meets the jaw produces an upturned shape that looks like a grin from any angle. Looks like a Labrador with a melon glued to its head. The animal is curious, but it isn't smiling at you. The face just shipped that way. There's an animal in the Arctic that talks to humans, watches humans, and follows humans. It just learned, far too late, what most of the friendly animals on this list have learned in their own way. Every continent's friendliest animal pays a price for it. If you made it this far, I post new animal deep dives like this every week. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.